Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be reviewing Hurricane Henri and its path as it moved through the Atlantic and then eventually curved up into parts of the Northeast. We're going to be reviewing how much rainfall some of these areas got. We saw some reports up near 7, 8, even 9 or more inches of rainfall. And then we're also going to be looking at some of the highest wind gusts we saw and much more. So we're going to be recapping it, again, talking about the rainfall, some of the flooding reports that we saw, and the wind gusts and much more in today's video. So it's going to be an interesting one. We're going to be doing, I don't know if I'm going to do this for every single hurricane or tropical storm, but I'll probably do it at least for the ones that are big and impact the United States. So for example, if we see a hurricane go through parts of the Gulf of Mexico and end up in Texas and Louisiana, I may do one of these reviewing Hurricane XYZ and for that hurricane or that tropical storm. So I think I'll probably start doing these the day after these storms, and let me know what you guys think about that idea. Let's get right into it, and let's start off with your current watches and warnings. You can see that we have some air quality alerts in effect for the west. We also have some red flag warnings for a little bit of South Dakota, Nebraska, and also into Wyoming. We have heat advisories for much of the Mississippi River Valley, and then also through areas like Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, all the way as far east as Florida and Alabama, with a few excessive heat warnings in effect for parts of Mississippi, Louisiana, and Arkansas. We also still have some flood watches up because of Tropical Depression Henri. Well, right now it is a tropical depression up in parts of the Northeast, so that includes some parts of Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Vermont, and also into New Hampshire. Taking a look at the records yesterday, we had a 110-degree report from Stovepipe Wells, California, with the low temperature in Bodie, California, where they got down to 25 degrees. The highest rainfall report was in McEwen, Tennessee, 7.93 inches of rainfall. So they got hammered with a ton of rainfall, and this is the highest rainfall report. We're going to be looking at the National Weather Service estimated rainfall and using some of the rainfall report data. The estimated rainfall, based on some of the radar data and much more, some of the estimated rainfall totals are near 18 or 19 inches within that area of Tennessee. So even though you have only a report of 7.93 inches, that's the report. We're looking at radar as well, and some areas northwest of McEwen, Tennessee, definitely got more than that. At least some areas got over 10 inches, and we even saw, again, some estimated reports around 18 or 19 inches. So we don't know how valid those are. That's, of course, an estimate from the National Weather Service, but again, it is scary to think about how much rainfall those areas got. They saw a ton of flash flooding yesterday, unfortunately. Let's look at the current radar data. This is as of about 9:20 a.m. Eastern time. You can see that we do have a little bit of a band of rainfall that moves from just offshore of New Jersey to central Long Island, western Connecticut, and then through the Hudson Valley of upstate New York. So you can see that we do have some of that rainfall in those areas. It's nothing too major by this point. We do have a little bit of a band of heavier rainfall within this small little line here, but for the most part, the majority of the rainfall is over with. This storm is right now somewhere within here, and it's going to be turning around and moving into the Gulf of Maine over the next couple of days. As it does that, it's going to start to bring some more rainfall into southern Vermont, southern New Hampshire, into Massachusetts as well. So we could be dealing with some extra rainfall into those areas. Taking a look at the total rainfall for this event, or the total expected rainfall added on. So this is the additional rainfall that we're expecting, 1 to 2 inches of rainfall as you get into that light green area, and then you can see those tiny pockets of 2 to 4 inches. That's in those dark greens. So that's where you could be seeing maybe 2, 3, even 4 inches through tomorrow afternoon. So this is going to be for the next, I would say, day or two when most of the rainfall will be over with. Eventually, as it's moving out into New Hampshire and Maine and then out to near Nova Scotia and those areas, it will be pretty much all said and done with by that point. Looking at the photo of the day, this is also regarding Tropical Storm Henri. There was a little bit of flooding. Picture credit from Max, by the way, in the comment section. He is a frequent commenter, and he sent in this photo. Well, it was a video. I took a screenshot from that video because there's no way for me to present the video format of that, so I took a screenshot from that video, and here it is right now. You can see that there is a little bit of water piling up on the roads, and you can see how saturated everything is, especially the ground, and that did cause some issues. We saw that with a lot of these trees falling over. It was with winds gusting to 40 miles per hour, not gusting to 70 or 80 or 90 miles per hour. Mostly some lower wind gust reports that typically would not bring down trees. But when you get 7 inches, 8 inches, 9 inches of rain, it does not take a lot of rain. It does not take a lot of wind to really knock down some of these trees. So thank you to Max for sending this in. If you want to send in your weather pictures, send them to the email right there, elitheweatherguyyt@gmail.com, and I'll look through them and I'll show some of them on the actual video. Taking a look at the highest wind gusts from this storm, you can see that the highest one was in Point Judith, Rhode Island, and then we had a bunch tide that was at 70 miles per hour. So again, nothing that was too high in terms of the wind speed. 70 miles per hour, again, quite high. But you're looking at this, and for the majority of these reports, they were down into the 50s for the highest wind gusts. Even some wind gusts peaking out around the 40s and 30s. Again, the winds were not really the big issue here, unless you lived along the immediate coast of, let's say, Rhode Island and Massachusetts. But for the most part, it was that rainfall that caused a lot more issues. Block Island got 69 miles per hour. So did Narragansett, Rhode Island, Kingston, Rhode Island, Great Gull Island, New York got 69 miles per hour. So we were looking at a bunch of these reports up near 68, 69, 70 miles per hour. And then again, it quickly fell off as you get away from the coast. That's when you get a little bit inland, and most of the wind gusts were up near 30, 40, even down near 20 miles per hour. Especially as you get into some of the areas further west. You look at some parts of upstate New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, barely got any wind out of this, and it was mostly the rain event. So it was only really an issue as you get into the coastal parts of southern New England. The rest of those areas, again, were not too impacted by the winds from this event. Taking a look at the past satellite images, this is of the storm while it's just southeast of Bermuda. Here's Bermuda right there, and you can see that it was a fairly decently developed storm. It was mainly just a cluster of clouds, but again, it was fairly well developed for a storm out there in the Atlantic. And as of that point, we were expecting it to kind of move to the northwest of Bermuda and then eventually just go out to sea, and we weren't expecting anything more out of it. We ended up seeing that it did kind of curve a little bit wider than what we were expecting and moved into the northeast. Here's the satellite image of it as it was making landfall in Rhode Island. So it did look like a fairly well-developed, wrapped-up storm, but it did look a little bit more like a nor'easter you might see, let's say, in the wintertime, than it did of a tropical system, and that's because of how big the storm was, and also because of how much outflow we saw. We saw these clouds ranging over a very wide area. It didn't look too much like a tropical storm as it was making landfall in southern New England. One thing that I want to show you guys is here's the snowfall report, or the rainfall reports, and this is the interactive map, which you can find if you just go to wrh.noaa.gov and then you do /map and then / again. So that's how you would find this link, and it's really useful. It does show you the total amount of rainfall that you see. Looking at a few of these spots, you can see that we're dealing with some amounts near 10 inches of rainfall in central New Jersey. You get up further to the north, you're dealing with closer to 5, 6 inches of rainfall. New York City, they got about 6 inches, maybe closer to 7 inches in some areas. We're looking at areas like Philadelphia getting closer to 3 inches, 2 to 3 inches of rainfall within that area. Atlantic City getting right around 2 to 3 inches of rainfall. Southern Rhode Island, again, was not a big issue with the rainfall, mostly with the winds within that area. So it really depended what side of the storm you were on. 2.96 inches estimated there. If we look up near somewhere like Hartford, we're looking at maybe an inch to 3 inches, even higher as you get into the eastern suburbs. You go into the Hudson Valley, and you're looking at maybe an inch to 2 inches. But most of that rainfall and most of that flooding, again, was occurring as you get up into New Jersey, western Long Island, the lower Hudson Valley of New York, northeastern Pennsylvania. We saw a ton of rainfall within these areas, and there were some pockets where you saw a lot of flooding. And you're going to see that. I'm going to look at the Wikipedia review page of the storm, and you're going to see that once we get to, it's going to go state by state, and then once you get to New Jersey, you're going to see that most of the data was coming right from here in central New Jersey. Most of those reports were from there with all that heavy rainfall, because we saw rainfall the night before. Then you got more rainfall and from tropical storm Henri, and that rainfall pretty much did not move. So there were some areas that kind of just got hammered within this zone right here with a ton of rainfall. Unfortunately, that did cause some flooding, especially with some of the terrain there. There are some hills, which means that some of that rain is flowing down the hills and causing some pooling at the bottom of that hill. We're also dealing with a lot of small streams moving through this area, so those, of course, got flooded, unfortunately. So there's a lot of things that unfortunately happened with this event because of all the terrain and the topography of that area. Now, going back here to the track of this storm, you can see that it was before a tropical depression. You can see that over this area, as it was east of Bermuda, it was a tropical depression. By this point of the storm, once it was down here, we were expecting, and I'll actually do it in a different color in yellow here so you can see it a little bit better. Once it was down into this part of the track, we were actually expecting that this was going to go out and kind of curve out just south of Nova Scotia. Not really expecting too much. And if you go back 7 days ago, I would say probably a little bit less than that, but if you go back a few days ago, I was talking about the storm mainly as a brush over storm that we really didn't need to pay attention to it. There was no models indicating it would impact anywhere along that northeast coastline, but unfortunately that did happen. And what we saw was that we slowly saw the models go from a track somewhat like this to a little bit closer to Cape Cod, then eventually had it making landfall. Then we saw the models start to curve and get a little bit crazier, where they went out near the Delmarva into New Jersey, Long Island, and eventually we saw it kind of middle out and it made landfall in Rhode Island. But again, that was a big shift from the models. You can see that it did attain Category 1 status as it was parallel to the shoreline of North Carolina, Virginia, Delaware, and New Jersey, and then eventually, as it was parallel to the latitude of New York City, it went down to a tropical storm in its strength. Taking a look at the Wikipedia page, I just copy and pasted it and then highlighted a few areas that I do think are important to look at. And again, this is all credits to the Wikipedia page. They actually have some great content there. I know a lot of people don't trust Wikipedia necessarily, but for weather especially, it's very, very useful. That's how I found the map for the track of the storm. That's how I found the map for the satellite images. They have satellite images from the storm, and they're really, really high definition. So definitely a great resource. Just search up tropical or Hurricane Henri Wikipedia, and you'll find that page, and it's very useful. They have a bunch of reports up there and a lot of data that I wouldn't otherwise not have been able to find. So looking at some of these areas that I highlighted, at least 140,000 houses experienced outages across New Jersey to Maine. So that's a lot of people without power, most of which came in eastern Connecticut, Rhode Island, and also into southeastern Massachusetts, mainly because of the combination of some rainfall and also those strongest winds were in that area. In New York, record-breaking rainfall of 1.94 inches fell in just 1 hour in Central Park. So if we were to extrapolate that and say that was a snowstorm, let's use even just a 7-to-1 ratio, that would be closer to 15, 16, or that would be closer to 13 or 14 inches of snowfall per hour if we were looking at this in the winter time with a storm similar to this. So just to give you an idea, 2 inches of rainfall in just 1 hour, again, that would be closer to maybe 14 to as much as 20 inches of snowfall within the winter time. Of course, nothing like this is going to happen in the winter time because you're not going to see a storm with that much moisture, but it does give you a good idea of just how intense some of these rainfall bands were. And especially if it just stays over your area for 1 hour, even 2 hours, you're going to get a good amount of rainfall just within 30 minutes to an hour of that very heavy rainfall. That was the wettest hour on record for New York City in its entire 120-year history of keeping track of these records, even more than 120 years. Over 6 inches fell in Brooklyn overnight on August 21st, with 4 to 5 inches coming down in other areas of the city. So a ton of rainfall over some of those boroughs. 4.45 inches in total fell during August 21st, the highest total in a day for the city, while the 7.01 total was the highest since Irene in 2011. In Rhode Island, on the morning of August 22nd, over 58,000 people were out of power in Rhode Island, with outages being particularly widespread in Washington County, which is the southernmost county of Rhode Island. Wind gusts reached over 70 miles per hour. Henri was the first named storm to make landfall in Rhode Island since Hurricane Bob back in 1991. In New Jersey, more than 8 inches of rainfall fell in the town of Cranberry. You're going to see a lot of these town names. If you search them up, they're pretty much all centered in central New Jersey. So just to kind of give you a good idea of where all of these town names actually are, because they're going to talk about all these different town names. So just to save you the time of searching up each individual one, most of these are within central New Jersey, so you can get a good geographical area of where they are. Up to 14 inches of rain fell in Concordia prior to Henri's landfall in Rhode Island, causing highly significant flash flooding. Up to 9 inches of rain fell in the state as well, bringing heavy flooding to multiple areas. Homes were flooded with up to 3 feet of water in Cranberry, and some residents and businesses were flooded in Milltown. Early afternoon, August 22nd, over 4,500 were reported without power in the state. Looking at Connecticut, 7,600 people were without power on the morning of August 22nd, mostly in those eastern counties. 4 nursing homes were evacuated when Henri made landfall. Over 248 were affected in towns of Old Saybrook, Mystic, Guilford, and West Haven. Those are the towns where they evacuated the nursing homes. Wind gusts in Massachusetts were ranging from 60 to 70 miles per hour in those areas, especially for the Cape Cod area. The people, a large tree fell on a house, and the people inside, a mother and her 2 children, 8-year-old and 21-month-old, survived, luckily. So we did see a lot of trees, especially in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, come down, because you had the combination of a little bit of rainfall, not too much, but that did help saturate the ground a little bit. And then you saw the strongest winds come up through that area as well. So we did see a lot of damage from falling trees within, especially Massachusetts and Rhode Island. And then elsewhere, 2 family members drowned near a pier in Oak Island, North Carolina, after being caught in strong rip currents produced as a result of Henri. So North Carolina, again, did not see anything from this storm in terms of winds or in terms of rainfall, but the rip currents, again, those are going to be widespread through the entirety of the East Coast. So pretty much from Georgia to Maine, you do not want to be on the ocean in the ocean for those areas, because we saw that storm, again, being very, very large in size, and the swells from this, the danger seas, are going to span much larger than the cloud cover of the storm. So they weren't even seeing clouds from Hurricane Henri, but they were seeing rip currents and strong ocean effects from Hurricane Henri, even though it was that far out. So again, you want to be careful with these types of storms. They can cause quite a lot of damage. So that is going to wrap it up for today's video. Let me know if you guys want me to do more of these after we see storms, let's say, make landfall within the United States. I might do more of these recaps. Also, send in your weather photo of the day to the email address in the description down below. If you have any flooding reports or flooding videos or images, send them down below from Hurricane Henri, and that would definitely be interesting to look at, and I'll probably feature you in the video. So again, that is going to wrap it up for today's video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.